is believed to have gone overboard in the Pacific. As Minister Sajjan has said, we are dedicating every resource to the search. To Master Sailor Earl's family and loved ones, we're keeping you in our thoughts during this incredibly difficult time. And to everyone aboard HMCS Winnipeg, we are standing with you. I know that this has already been a very challenging year for those serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. This morning, I just came from visiting the Ottawa Hospital. I spoke to nurses, doctors, and staff about delivering vaccine doses. I also thanked them for their outstanding work, day in, day out, throughout the months of this pandemic, for everything they're doing to keep us and our loved ones safe. C'était un grand plaisir pour moi ce matin d'aller voir à l'hôpital d'Ottawa pour rencontrer les travailleurs de première ligne, pour leur remercier directement pour le travail incroyable qu'ils sont en train de faire. On commence à être au début de la fin avec l'arrivée des vaccins, mais il y a encore beaucoup de travail à faire pour garder les Canadiens en sécurité pour les prochains mois, et je sais qu'ils vont continuer d'être là pour nous. On Sunday night, the very first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine arrived in Canada. Less than 24 hours later, vaccinations had already started for the most vulnerable and frontline workers. This morning, I have even more good news to share. I can announce that Canada has secured our second agreement for early doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Canada is now contracted to receive up to 168,000 doses of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine before the end of December, pending Health Canada approval. These doses are part of the guaranteed 40 million doses we have secured from Moderna, and deliveries could begin within 48 hours of regulatory approval. Like the co-founder of Moderna pointed out a few weeks ago, Canada was among the very first to pre-order their vaccine. That, combined with our solid plan for vaccine rollout, is why we have an agreement for early doses. As with the early shipments of the Pfizer vaccine, this moves us even further forward on getting Canadians protected as quickly as possible. The regulatory process for the Moderna vaccine is ongoing, but again, I want to assure Canadians that any vaccine approved in Canada will be both safe and effective. Je suis heureux d'annoncer aujourd'hui que le Canada a conclu une deuxième entente pour recevoir plus tôt des doses de vaccins contre la COVID-19. Une fois qu'il sera approuvé par Santé Canada, l'entente prévoit la livraison de 168 000 doses du vaccin de Moderna avant la fin décembre. Ces doses font partie de l'entente des 40 millions de doses que nous avons avec Moderna. Les livraisons pourraient commencer juste 48 heures après l'approbation du vaccin, comme c'était le cas pour les livraisons du vaccin de Pfizer qui ont commencé plus tôt. Cette nouvelle signifie que nous pourrons prendre encore plus d'avance pour protéger les Canadiens. Le processus d'approbation est toujours en cours pour le candidat vaccin de Moderna. Je veux, une fois de plus, rassurer les Canadiens en leur disant que tout vaccin approuvé au Canada est sécuritaire et efficace. No one and no community will be left behind. We have a plan to reach everyone who wants a vaccine, no matter where they live. Of course, shipping in the winter, especially to the far north, isn't without its challenges. The Moderna vaccine does not need some of the extra special handling requirements of the one from Pfizer, including ultra-cold freezers, and that makes it a better option to ship over long distances to more remote areas. So doses of this vaccine will be directed to the north, as well as to remote and Indigenous communities. The territories are scheduled to receive doses of the Moderna vaccine in the coming weeks, pending Health Canada approval. We're working to ensure the logistics planning is ready when vaccines are available and have already shipped medical-grade freezers to the north. As soon as we get the green light, we'll be ready to go. On Pfizer, I also have an update to share. We've now confirmed that next week we will receive about 200,000 of our total early doses from Pfizer. As well, we will have 70 sites ready to administer these doses up from 14 sites this week. À propos de Pfizer, je peux aussi partager d'autres nouvelles. Nous avons maintenant confirmé que la semaine prochaine, nous recevrons 200 000 doses faisant partie du total prévu avec Pfizer. De plus, nous aurons 70 sites de vaccination pour ces doses, donc 56 de plus que cette semaine. Le Canada a maintenant des ententes pour recevoir jusqu'à 417 000 doses avant le 1er janvier. Je tiens à remercier la ministre Anand pour son leadership incroyable dans ce dossier, mais j'aimerais aussi souligner le travail remarquable qu'effectue le major général Fortin, son équipe et tous les employés de l'Agence de la santé publique pour assurer le déploiement des vaccins. Il s'agit d'un effort pan-canadien. Notre gouvernement continuera de travailler avec les provinces et les territoires par l'intermédiaire du Centre national des opérations pour veiller à ce que les doses soient distribuées à la population le plus rapidement possible. Comme j'ai annoncé lors de la rencontre des premiers ministres la semaine passée, le gouvernement fédéral va couvrir 100% du coût des vaccins et les fournitures nécessaires pour les administrer. Les doses seront gratuites pour les Canadiens. Et les provinces et territoires n'auront pas à puiser dans leur budget pour les payer non plus. In addition to vaccines, we're also continuing to invest in treatments for COVID-19. Today, I can announce that we are providing up to $6.7 million for the Canadian company Arch BioPartners to support the development of their leading drug candidate to treat severe cases of COVID-19. This new funding was provided on the advice of Canada's leading experts in the field who are serving on our COVID-19 Therapeutics Task Force. Progress on made-in-Canada treatments, a second agreement for early delivery of vaccine doses, the most vulnerable already starting to receive these life-saving shots. This is the good news we all needed. This pandemic will end. We will get through this. But for now, we need to be incredibly careful. Keep each other safe. Keep your grandparents safe. Keep our doctors and nurses safe. Do the things you know that are going to help us get through this long winter. Vaccines are coming. Vaccines are already here. But we need to make it through this winter in the best possible situation without seeing more tragedies, without seeing more losses. That means we all have to do our part. Nos premiers vaccins sont en train d'arriver. Ce n'est pas le temps de faire des rassemblements des temps des fêtes. Il faut être très prudent et continuer nos efforts. Gardez vos distances, portez un masque, utilisez l'application Alerte COVID, évitez les rassemblements, lavez-vous les mains, continuez de faire tout ce qu'on doit faire pour se protéger les uns les autres. Ça a été une longue année 2020. Mais on va pouvoir célébrer en 2021 quand on en aura fini avec cette pandémie. On voit la fin qui s'en vient avec les vaccins, mais d'ici là, nous devons rester prudents, nous devons faire tout ce qu'on sait qu'on peut faire pour protéger nos êtres chers. Job one for our government is protecting Canadians. That's why we've been working around the clock on procuring everything from PPE to rapid tests to safe, effective vaccines. But let's remember, this is a global pandemic. To end COVID-19 anywhere, we have to end it everywhere. Pour se débarrasser rapidement de la COVID-19, il faut que les gens partout aient accès à des vaccins le plus vite possible. Hier encore, la ministre Gould et la ministre Anand ont annoncé que le Canada allait investir un montant supplémentaire de 485 millions de dollars dans une collaboration mondiale pour accélérer l'accès aux outils de lutte contre la COVID-19. Cet investissement va fournir des traitements et des vaccins ainsi que des ressources en soins de santé aux pays en développement. De plus, afin de continuer à protéger la santé des plus vulnérables, la ministre Gould a annoncé que le Canada fournira aussi du financement pour aider différents programmes de nutrition et de sécurité alimentaire. La lutte contre la COVID-19 est un effort commun. Nous devons travailler ensemble pour vaincre ce virus et bâtir un avenir plus fort et plus sain pour tous. Finally, I want to end this morning by recognizing that today marks the 5th anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report. The residential school system was one of the darkest chapters in our history. It has left a tragic legacy that continues to this day. To the survivors, family members, and all those who shared their truth, your courage and strength is remarkable. I also want to recognize the leadership of Senator Murray Sinclair, who's retiring from the Senate in January. His work as the Chief Commissioner changed Canada for the better. Senator Sinclair, like so many others who were part of the Commission, showed us the path forward, and it's up to all of us to walk the path of reconciliation. Together with survivors and communities, we have made important progress on the Commission's calls to action. 80% of the calls that are the sole or shared responsibility of the federal government are now completed or well underway. In the last few weeks alone, we invested $500 million to support Indigenous communities in exercising their jurisdiction over child and family services. We introduced legislation to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Our government will continue to work in partnership on everything from closing gaps in infrastructure to ending inequalities in the criminal justice system. We have moved forward, but we're not done yet. The national tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls must finally end. Over the last 5 years, we've worked with partners and communities to put a stop to violence against Indigenous women, girls, LGBTQ, and Two-Spirit people. Aujourd'hui, la ministre Bennett a souligné les investissements qui nous permettront de continuer à aller de l'avant, notamment en ce qui concerne l'établissement de nouveaux refuges et d'une stratégie globale de prévention de la violence. Notre gouvernement continuera d'être un partenaire dans le cadre des efforts déployés pour parvenir à la réconciliation et bâtir un avenir meilleur pour tous. Merci tout le monde. Je passe maintenant la parole à la docteure Tam. Teresa.
Bonjour, good day to everyone. There have been 468,862 cases of COVID-19 in Canada, including 13,553 deaths. Nationally, there are over 75,842 active cases across the country. And yesterday, 6,731 cases were reported nationally. In addition, there were almost 1,400 new cases reported for Saturday and Sunday, and this brings the average daily case count to over 6,540 cases for the past week. The number of people experiencing severe illness continues to increase. So over the past 7 days, there were an average of 3,020 individuals with COVID-19 being treated in Canadian hospitals, including over 600 in critical care, and an average of over 110 deaths were reported each day. Following last week's authorization of the first COVID-19 vaccine for use in Canada, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, Canada's independent expert advisory group on immunization, has released recommendations on the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. NACI's recommendations include important guidance on its safe and effective administration, and this includes the time interval between the first and second dose of the vaccine, and considerations for special populations, such as pregnant women and individuals who are immunocompromised or who have a severe allergic reaction to any of the components used in the vaccine. Canada's expert recommendations will support the provinces and territories and Indigenous leaders in the rollout of the COVID-19 immunization campaign across jurisdictions. As the COVID-19 landscape continues to evolve, NACI recommendations will be updated with additional evidence on authorized vaccines as it becomes available. Yesterday was a day of hope and excitement. Less than a week following the approval of the first vaccine, we began to hear and see the experiences of the first people vaccinated against COVID-19 in Canada, including personal support workers in Ontario and residents of long-term care in Quebec. Today, we have more good news with the prospect of the early availability of the Moderna vaccine once it receives regulatory approval. It is evident from the pace with which we have been able to move from approval to delivery and rollout of the first vaccination programs for priority populations that the ground has been well prepared for the next chapter in our response. As we move into this next chapter of Canada's COVID-19 response, I want to focus on a special ingredient that has and will continue to underpin our success. That is the partnership between public health and the public at large. When we all work together, each of us doing our part to reduce the likelihood of getting infected and spreading the virus, we are helping our health workforce. Our continued efforts are not only helping public health to quickly interrupt chains of transmission, we're also assisting the broader health workforce to plan for and roll out one of the most complex immunization campaigns in Canada's history. Canadians can continue to help by following public health advice and keeping up with good hygienic habits, physical distancing, hand washing, and mask wearing to prevent the spread of COVID-19 while we prepare the ground for widespread and lasting control through immunization. Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Il y a eu 468 862 cas de COVID-19 au Canada, dont 13 553 décès. À l'échelle nationale, il y a plus de 75 842 cas actifs. Hier, 6 731 cas ont été signalés au pays. En outre, samedi et dimanche, il y a eu presque 1 400 nouveaux cas. Cela porte le nombre moyen de cas par jour à plus de 6 540 au cours de la semaine dernière. Le nombre de personnes gravement malades continue d'augmenter. Au cours des 7 derniers jours, en moyenne, 3 020 personnes atteintes de la COVID-19 ont été traitées dans les hôpitaux canadiens, dont plus de 600 se trouvaient aux soins intensifs et plus de 110 décès ont été signalés en moyenne chaque jour. À la suite de l'autorisation la semaine dernière du premier vaccin contre la COVID-19 à être utilisé au Canada, le Comité consultatif national de l'immunisation, groupe consultatif d'experts indépendants sur l'immunisation au Canada, a publié des recommandations sur l'utilisation du vaccin de Pfizer-BioNTech contre la COVID-19. Les recommandations du CCNI comprennent des conseils importants sur son administration sûre et efficace, y compris l'intervalle de temps entre la première et la seconde dose du vaccin, ainsi que les considérations relatives à des populations particulières, comme les femmes enceintes et les personnes immunodéprimées ou ayant eu une réaction allergique grave à l'un des composants utilisés dans le vaccin de Pfizer-BioNTech contre la COVID-19. Les recommandations des experts du CCNI aideront les provinces et territoires et les dirigeants autochtones à orchestrer la campagne de vaccination contre la COVID-19 dans toutes les compétences. Comme situation concernant la COVID-19 continue d'évoluer, le CCNI mettra à jour ses recommandations à mesure que des données probantes supplémentaires sur les vaccins autorisés seront disponibles. Hier, c'était un jour d'espoir et d'enthousiasme. Moins d'une semaine après l'approbation du vaccin de Pfizer-BioNTech, nous avons commencé à entendre parler de l'expérience des premières personnes vaccinées contre la COVID-19 au Canada, notamment les préposés aux services de soutien en Ontario et les résidents des établissements de soins de longue durée au Québec. Aujourd'hui, nous avons d'autres bonnes nouvelles, la possibilité que le vaccin Moderna soit disponible plus tôt que prévu, une fois qu'il aura reçu l'approbation des autorités réglementaires. Il est évident, d'après le rythme auquel nous avons pu passer de l'approbation à la livraison et à l'exécution des premiers programmes de vaccination des populations prioritaires, que notre planification a été efficace pour la prochaine étape de notre intervention à la COVID-19. Alors que nous abordons cette prochaine étape de l'intervention du Canada à la COVID-19, nous voulons mettre l'accent sur un atout spécial qui est à la base de notre succès et qui continuera de l'être. Il s'agit du partenariat entre la santé publique et le grand public. Quand nous collaborons tous, chacun d'entre nous faisant sa part pour réduire la probabilité d'être infecté et de propager le virus, nous aidons les professionnels de la santé. Non seulement nos efforts continus aident la santé publique à briser rapidement les chaînes de transmission, nous aidons également l'ensemble des travailleurs de la santé à planifier et à orchestrer l'une des campagnes de vaccination les plus complexes de l'histoire du Canada. Les Canadiens peuvent continuer à aider en suivant les conseils de santé publique et en gardant des bonnes habitudes d'hygiène, à savoir la distanciation physique, le lavage des mains et le port de masque, afin de prévenir la propagation de la COVID-19 pendant que nous nous préparons à contrôler le virus de façon généralisée et durable par la vaccination. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Nu. Le premier ministre est disponible pour prendre des questions pendant 20 minutes aujourd'hui. La ministre Anand, les docteurs et le major général Fortin resteront disponibles pour une autre période de 20 minutes. The Prime Minister will be available to answer questions for 20 minutes today. Minister Anand, doctors, and Major General Fortin will remain available for another 20 minutes to answer more questions. Starting with the phone, en commençant par le téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Ryan Talty, National Post. Your line is open.
Yeah, good morning, Prime Minister. One of the companies that received military support for its long-term care homes when they were failing paid substantial dividends to its investors throughout the course of the year. Given that Canadian taxpayers paid for the military to be there, as well as to support those long-term care homes in a number of other ways, do you think it's right that that company was paying dividends to its shareholders in the millions of dollars while it needed the military support?
I think those are certainly questions to ask, Ryan, and I know over the coming months there will be many reflections by Canadians and others on that. Our focus from the very beginning was to just be there for Canadians who needed help, whether it was rolling out unprecedented direct supports like the CERB and the wage subsidy, whether it was shipping PPE to the provinces and giving them extra support for their healthcare systems, or whether it was directly through sending in the Canadian Armed Forces to support in long-term care homes. Our preoccupation was just being there for Canadians, and that's exactly what we did.
Following up, Ryan?
Yeah, on another issue, with the vaccines that you're announced today with Pfizer and Moderna, do we have a forecast for which one we expect will come next and which one we think will be key to really expanding the vaccine rollout to go beyond the targeted groups that we're seeing now?
Well, first of all, we know that we're expecting millions of doses in the first months of 2021 through Pfizer and Moderna. But at the same time, there are two other vaccine candidates going through the Health Canada rolling review regulatory process as we speak. And we are certainly optimistic that there will be more vaccines approved with more doses. As you know, Canada has secured a better and larger range of potential vaccine suppliers than just about any other country to secure more doses per capita for Canadians than for any other country in the world. So we are very, very well positioned, but every step of the way, Health Canada needs to do its full, rigorous approvals process so that any vaccine approved in Canada will be guaranteed to be safe and effective.
Merci. Opérateur, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Ça fait 2 fois en l'espace de 2 semaines à peu près que vous annoncez une arrivée hâtive de vaccins. C'est plus que ça à quoi on s'attendait. Quand on revoit des ententes comme ça, est-ce que ça coûte plus cher pour que les vaccins arrivent plus tôt?
Dès le début, cet été, on a travaillé avec les différentes compagnies et comme le directeur de Moderna a dit quelques semaines, le fait que Canada ait été un des premiers pays à signer, à s'engager avec Moderna, ça nous donne des avantages par rapport à leur capacité de livrer des vaccins plus tôt comme cela. Mais sur ça, je suis très content de passer la parole à la ministre Anand, qui a été responsable pour ces contrats.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. C'est une question très, très importante. Comme le Premier ministre a dit, c'est part de nos ententes avec les fournisseurs de vaccins de négocier des termes au sujet de la coût, par exemple, les vaccins. Nous devons payer the fair market value of these vaccines. C'est une chose très importante, mais notre priorité est d'avoir des vaccins ici au Canada pour toute la population canadienne. Et ça, c'est la priorité de moi et de notre gouvernement. Et nous allons avoir les vaccins ici, dans ce pays, ce mois. 7 mois, ça c'est la chose la plus importante, je pense. Merci.
En suivi, Mélanie?
Oui, mais en fait, en suivi, je vais reposer la même question parce que la réponse n'était pas vraiment présente. Est-ce que ça coûte plus cher les recevoir plus tôt? Puis dans un deuxième temps, en suivi aussi, est-ce que vous attendez à ce que Santé Canada approuve le vaccin de Moderna cette semaine?
Well, thank you so much. I have answered this question, I believe, last week, and I'll just refresh that response because it remains accurate, that there is a continued negotiation about the deliveries of these vaccines and the terms of the deliveries. And as we push for earlier deliveries for Canadians and for the health and safety of Canadians during this crucial time, we are paying fair market value of these vaccines. And in addition, could you just remind me what your second question was?
Oui, when would Moderna
oui, ça
vaccine
c'est important. Oui, mais je voudrais dire que je n'ai pas de rôle, pas du tout, dans l'approbation de ces vaccins, et ça c'est correct. Nous devons laisser le Santé Canada de faire le travail très très important avec l'expertise de l'organisation là. Et après ça, nous sommes prêts de recevoir les livraisons de vaccins.
Effectivement, l'approbation de vaccins, ça ne relève pas du politique, évidemment. C'est les experts à Santé Canada qui font leur travail, comme ils le font pour tout médicament ou tout vaccin au Canada en temps normaux. Ils suivent toutes les étapes nécessaires. On a entendu que ça continue bien pour Moderna et il pourrait avoir une réponse dans la semaine à venir. Donc, on est positionné, si cette approbation vient, pour recevoir des centaines de milliers de doses de Moderna, même avant la fin décembre. Mais évidemment, le travail que doit faire Santé Canada doit être fait sans compromis et ils vont continuer de faire le nécessaire pour approuver ces vaccins avec certitude le plus rapidement possible.
Merci. Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Brett Forster, APTN News. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. The PRC commissioners have offered a very different take on your government's reconciliation progress than the one you just offered in your remarks. They say the progress has been slow, uneven, and that your government still doesn't have a tangible plan to implement their calls to action. How do you respond to their criticism?
First of all, I welcome and thank the commissioners, not just for their extraordinary work over the past decade that set Canada on a better course for the future, but their continued engagement in making sure that reconciliation is something taken on not just by the federal government, but by provinces and territories, and indeed by non-Indigenous Canadians as well, because we all need to be partners in this process. Over the past 5 years, we have completed or are well underway on 80% of the TRC calls to action that directly touch the federal government. But there's a lot more to do, and we are going to continue working on that. We know that what took generations and indeed centuries to break and to destroy will take more than 5 years to fix. but the work that we have done as a government has been more than any other government in the past, and we're just getting started. We know how much more there is to do, and we will continue to work with strong voices in leadership like the TRC commissions and Indigenous communities right across the country to move forward on reconciliation.
Following up, Mr. Foster.
Yes, thank you. So again, the commissioners, of course, said they welcome these recent announcements and what progress has been made, but they're also sounding alarm about the pace of action. They want to see you renew that sense of urgency. So what do you say to that?
I share their impatience. I share the sense of urgency. Certainly this pandemic has demonstrated yet again just how vulnerable certain Indigenous communities are and how much we need to continue to work even faster on the path of reconciliation. But at the same time, we need to remember that as much as Ottawa might want to put forward the answers and move forward very quickly, it can't be that way. We need to do this in partnership, hand in hand with Indigenous communities who need to determine their future and their path. And we have to be there to support, to resource, and to accompany them. And that always takes a little bit longer. But I share your impatience, Brett. I share the impatience of the commissioners. I share the impatience of all Canadians to continue doing the hard work of reconciliation and move forward as quickly as possible to the better country we know is ahead of us down this shared road.
Thank you. Moving to the room now. Rachel.
Hi, Prime Minister. Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. Should corporations and private medical labs in Canada be able to purchase vaccines to give to their own employees and clients? Is that consistent with the principles of the Canada Health Act?
Our priority is ensuring that all Canadians have access to a free, safe, and effective vaccine as soon as possible. The deals, the contracts we have signed with 7 different potential vaccine producers, the contracts we have signed for potentially up to 10 doses per Canadian over the coming months will ensure that all Canadians get access to a free and safe vaccine. Private companies can make their decisions as they wish. None of that will have any impact on the fact that all Canadians who want one will get a free vaccine in the coming months of 2021.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Good afternoon. I'm here to ask you about Dominic Barton and the opioid crisis that's devastating communities across North America. He is, of course, your ambassador to China, but was previously your government's top economic advisor. And of course, he was the man in charge at McKinsey & Company, the global consulting firm, for almost a decade. So what Canadians might not know is the role that McKinsey played in helping to boost sales of OxyContin for Purdue Pharma. This is the company, of course, which is now whose role is being examined in the courts. So even as Mr. Barton was offering you economic advice on how to boost growth here, the opioid crisis was unfolding and causing financial ruin and personal ruin across North America. Now, in recent days, court documents revealed that McKinsey was actually proposing, and this is under Mr. Barton's leadership, paying rebates to pharmacists so they wouldn't stop dispensing OxyContin if there had been overdoses in their area. Now, what we're trying to figure out is what Mr. Barton knew about this. At a House of Commons committee he appeared before last week, asked him, was he aware of this work, which a former McKinsey consultant called the Banality of Evil MBA edition? He didn't answer. He said he told the House of Commons committee to look at the McKinsey website where there's an apology for this. The apology makes no mention of Mr. Barton's role in this. We then called McKinsey and we asked them, what role did Mr. Barton play in this? Was he aware of this? They said to call Mr. Barton. We called Mr. Barton. He didn't reply to us. We talked to your office. Your office didn't reply to us. So we're here to ask you, have you asked Mr. Barton whether he was aware of what was happening at McKinsey under his tenure?
Dominic Barton is an extraordinary Canadian who is doing great work for us in China as Canada's ambassador. He has a long history in business and in economics and is the right person to continue moving forward at a very difficult time in Canada-China relations. His leadership on bringing home, on working hard to bring home the two Michaels, his defense of Canadian interests, including Canadian commercial interests, and his continued engagement on creating opportunities and growth for Canadians makes him an outstanding representative, and I'm pleased to have him by my side on the international stage as we work very hard to both stand up for Canadian values and to move forward on building a better future. In regards to the opioids epidemic, this government has been extraordinarily active from day one, whether it's been partnering with provinces and territories on responses, working directly with frontline workers, or moving forward on approval of safe consumption sites, which there was one when we took office. Now there are dozens and dozens all across the country. We know there is much more to do to counter this extraordinary tragedy that is hitting so many families across the country. Even as we deal with this COVID pandemic, the opioids epidemic continues as well. We will keep doing everything we can to support Canadians and keep them safe in the coming years.
Thank you. Next question in the room.
Hélène Buzetti du Devoir. Bonjour, M. Trudeau. J'aimerais revenir à cette histoire de Radio-Canada que vous songez à utiliser la loi sur les langues officielles pour imposer l'usage du français dans les entreprises à charte fédérale au Québec. Qu'est-ce que cet outil-là, la loi sur les langues officielles, vous permettrait de faire que la loi 101, que tout le monde vous demande, que tout le monde demande au Québec d'élargir aux entreprises, vous permettrait pas de faire? C'est quoi la différence?
Nous savons que le Canada est un pays bilingue, mais pour que le Canada demeure un pays bilingue, le Québec doit être d'abord et avant tout francophone. C'est pour ça que même pendant que nous sommes là pour défendre les langues officielles en situation minoritaire à travers le pays, nous allons aussi, comme on a dit dans le discours du trône, être là pour défendre la langue française au Québec. C'est pour ça que nous regardons cette modernisation de la loi sur les langues officielles qui est certainement due et qui va avoir des mesures pour protéger le français partout, y compris au Québec. Nous sommes encore en train de travailler là-dessus, mais je peux souligner que je suis tout à fait d'accord avec les anciens premiers ministres du Québec et les Québécois qui, comme moi, sont préoccupés par le déclin du français. Et donc, nous allons travailler pour protéger le français au Québec. Mais en plus de tout ce qu'il faut faire pour protéger le français au Québec, c'est le gouvernement fédéral qui a aussi une responsabilité pour protéger la langue française partout au Canada. Ce n'est pas juste à la protéger au Québec, c'est la protéger à Saint-Boniface, à Timmins, à Caraquette, à Moncton. On a pu défendre et sauver l'Université francophone de l'Ontario quand il y avait des politiciens conservateurs qui voulaient le couper. On est là pour nommer que des juges bilingues à la Cour suprême du Canada. Et comme j'ai dit, on va continuer notre travail pour moderniser la loi sur les langues officielles pour bien protéger cette belle langue française que nous aimons tous.
Merci. Prochaine question dans la salle.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. On voit beaucoup, M. Trudeau, de Canadiens qui sont très préoccupés par le vaccin, qui ne veulent pas, en fait, l'avoir. Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire concrètement dans les prochaines semaines, dans les prochains mois, pour que tous les Canadiens soient vaccinés?
D'abord, il y a tout un travail pour démontrer que le plan que nous avons en place, qui commence avec l'approbation de Santé Canada, puis passe par les professionnels de la santé en train de livrer les vaccins à travers le pays, chapeautés si bien par le lieutenant général, le major général Danny Fortin. On est très, très chanceux d'avoir des éléments qui vont rassurer les Canadiens. On voit aussi qu'avec ces premières doses, on démontre la sécurité de façon concrète pour le vaccin aux Canadiens. Et de plus en plus, oui, les politiciens vont encourager les gens de se faire vacciner. Et moi, certainement, personnellement, dès que j'aurai la chance, dès que ce sera de mon tour, je vais me faire vacciner avec enthousiasme. Mais je sais qu'encore plus, c'est les médecins. c'est les scientifiques, c'est les gens de la santé publique qui vont être écoutés comme ils ont été écoutés par les Canadiens à travers le pays pendant cette pandémie, qui vont rassurer les Canadiens que tout vaccin disponible au Canada sera sécuritaire et efficace. Depuis les débuts, les Canadiens ont écouté les conseils de la santé publique, les conseils des médecins, des experts, et ont pu gérer cette crise avec évidemment trop de tragédies, mais mieux quand même que beaucoup d'autres pays. Nous allons continuer de faire confiance aux scientifiques et aux experts qui nous gardent en sécurité à tous les jours, et j'ai bien confiance que les Canadiens vont être rassurés de voir à quel point on a des processus rigoureux et des experts extraordinaires qui nous démontrent à quel point c'est la bonne chose à faire que de prendre ce vaccin sécuritaire et efficace pour qu'on puisse en finir avec cette pandémie.
Prochaine question dans la salle.
Prime Minister Michael Couture with Global National. I wanted to ask you, last week, Dr. Bonnie Henry said that there's information that they, quote, received internationally and from Canadian agencies that there's been a concerted effort to try and interrupt the cold chain, for example, and sabotage immunization programs. How concerned are you about that, especially given the fact that we're now ramping up the number of vaccination sites, and how are we going to secure this and prevent any kind of sabotage?
Part of reassuring Canadians about the safety and efficiency of the vaccine is not just the extraordinarily rigorous Health Canada approval process, which was done quicker than usual, but without cutting any corners or taking shortcuts. The amount of resources we put forward, the amount of unprecedented cooperation and collaboration across allies and with the medical community has allowed for a full approval of these vaccines. Furthermore, the logistical delivery of those vaccines has been extraordinarily important to establish, to secure, and to ensure no interference or problems along that chain. And that's why we are so fortunate to have Major General Denis Fortin leading the logistical rollout of these vaccines and ensuring the integrity and the safety of that supply chain. And I'm happy to turn to him right now. Denis, if you could speak to the safety and integrity of the supply chain.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As I indicated before, there are a number of threat indicators that we're closely monitoring between the agencies, intelligence service, the law enforcement agencies. The appropriate level of information is shared down the line to provinces and territories, to the law enforcement agencies so that they take concrete actions. The logistics service providers, UPS, FedEx and NMR joint venture, they take the appropriate measures as they are responsible to deliver along the cold chain. They monitor threats along the transfer points, and they take the appropriate measures as well. What I could say to all Canadians is that the appropriate measures are being taken by the appropriate organizations. And while I understand that there are questions about possible risks at a location or another, rest assured that it's being closely monitored by all parties.
Thank you. We have time for two quick questions.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. On the Moderna vaccine, you were talking about doses going to the north and to Indigenous communities. Is that entire first shipment going to be going north, going to these communities, or other groups or regions going to be getting it? And on the Pfizer vaccine, the 200,000 doses coming in, is that still going to be going on a per capita basis, or do you see a time when you're going to have to start prioritizing areas with a higher case count?
Excellent questions, Tom. First of all, we've been working very, very closely, not just with Moderna, but with premiers of the territories and with leaders in remote and Indigenous communities to look at their schedule of delivery, their availability of resources to ensure that the most vulnerable are prioritized first. We will have more to announce in the coming days as Moderna firms up its own logistical and rollout plans, but you can rest assured that the conversations that I've had directly with the provinces and specifically on Moderna with the territories have gone very, very well, and people can rest assured that our capacity to get the vaccines to people who need it most and earliest will continue. And like I said, we'll have more to say on that in the coming days. In regards to Pfizer, the rollout schedule is continuing to be worked on. We have to understand that these are companies that are ramping up production in a massive way, rapidly, of a product that needs to be safe and secure every step of the way. There is uncertainties in their production. Our responsibility is to provide certainty on logistics and on delivery, and that's exactly what we are focused on. But I'm sure Minister Anand could add a little bit on both Moderna and Pfizer.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Just to build on the logistics question that you asked, Tom, we are responsible for transit into Canada of the Moderna vaccine. So unlike Pfizer, that is bringing that vaccine to us and actually delivering the vaccines to the sites themselves, Canada will be picking up the Moderna vaccine, and that is work that is going on now to ensure that the logistics are in place to go and pick up the Moderna vaccine. And in terms of the shipment of the Pfizer vaccine, which was the second part of your question, we will have 70 sites ready to administer those doses, which is up from 14 sites this week. So you can see that, as the Prime Minister rightly mentioned, we are all ramping up. The companies are ramping up their production, and at the same time, here in Canada, we are ensuring that logistics systems are in place for the distribution of these vaccines right across the country.
Lieber Thium, Canadian Press, sir. I wanted to ask about the RCMP watchdog report this morning. It says that it was acceptable for the Mounties to monitor demonstrations, record video of protesters, scour social media and other open sources for information about activists protesting the now defunct Northern Gateway Pipeline project, and collect license plate numbers for intelligence gathering purposes. I was wondering if you agree with this assessment from the watchdog.
Obviously, this is an important report, and we're going to take a careful look at it and its recommendations as well as conclusions. We know there is much to do to improve the RCMP in terms of systemic discrimination, systemic racism, and how it deals with certain groups. That is work that is being done not just with the RCMP, but in police forces and intelligence and security agencies right across the country. We will, of course, take careful note of recommendations coming from broad sources on how to move forward with the right solutions for Canada and for Canadians.
Thank you, Prime Minister. This is all the time you have with us today.